Hey everyone, we're going to go through chapter 2.2 in the textbooks starting on page 96, and we'll look at some of the examples in this video. So, going through some of the things we've already learned, we'll look at this example here. This is for Cookie Club sales. So basically we have 7 people, and they brought us this sheet of how many cookies they sold. We'll just go through one line. Brian sold 3 boxes of cookies. He made $7.50, and you could see that we calculated that by taking the number of boxes sold times $2.50. That's how much we're selling them for. And we copied over the $3 from here. So basically, we had quantity 3. Each box costs $1. That gives us $3. You'll notice that they look different because here it's formatted as currency, and here it's formatted as a number. And then we take profit is basically D3 minus E3, or revenue minus cost, and we get the profit. Okay, so this is a very simplistic table. It could be a lot more complicated, but this is the idea. Now, we have this, and we have to make a report, and they want to ask us what is the average of our quantity, revenue, cost, profit, etc. Like, what's the average across everybody? What can we set as standards for organizations? So if you look at page 96, we'll see how to do that. We type in equals, letting Excel know that we're about to start a formula, and we type in average. And if we look at the tooltip, it says returns the average arithmetic mean of its arguments, which can be numbers, names, arrays, reference, etc. So I'll type in average, bracket, telling Excel what parameters we're going to put in. And I could type in all these numbers, like 3, 43, etc. But instead, we'll grab the cells. So I'm going to grab the first one and drag down, and it gives me the range of C3 to C9. I'll close the bracket and hit enter. So it says that the average number of boxes sold is 97, and I'll bring that back in like this. And you'll notice that even though some people have sold 345 boxes, for all 7 people, this was the average. Okay, now if we drag like this, we should be able to get the average for each column. Now these are dollar amounts, so I'll turn them in like this. So this was telling us that the average number of boxes sold per person was 97. The average revenue brought in was 243. The average cost per person was 97. And the average profit was 146. And we could do this in the example on figure 2-1 and so 2-1 to figure that out. And as we covered in the last video, the example in 2-22 on page 97 is basically going into properties, format cells, and we go to border, and we'll pick up the double line and apply them. Okay, so we get the double line for our chart. Okay, next we'll take a look at cell styles on page 98, 99, and 100. And basically, we'll grab the header that I have up here, and we'll click up here where it says Cell Styles. It gives me a whole bunch of different options depending on what the numbers are. And we're going to talk about conditional formatting a little bit, and we'll get into more of these details. But for now, we'll just look at the color. So here we could pick a different style depending on which one we choose. And let's pick this one. Okay, pretty simple. We could format them. And then as we move forward, whenever we have cells of this type, we could format them with a particular style depending on what we're trying to do. We just have to select those cells first, right? So we could change them depending on what look we're going for. Okay, we're going to talk about some of that to automatically help us figure out what's going on with our data. So you can play around with that and see how it works. It's relatively straightforward. And next, we're going to look at Format Painter. Okay, so Format Painter is this icon right down here at the bottom. And if we click on it, it says we can copy the formatting from one cell to another. So how do we do that? Let's click on these cells down here. Okay, so if you remember, what's special about these cells is that they have a double line on the top and bottom. I'll press Format Painter and then paint them across the top over here. Okay, now if we take a look, it copied the format from here and pasted them on the top. Let's try the same thing in reverse. So I'll grab these guys over here that are blue, Format Painter, drop it down here, and they become blue as well. Okay, I could undo that by pressing Control Z. I can deselect the selection I have up here by Control D and press Escape. I'll head back to normal, and that's how Format Painter works. So if I add another column here, I could just use Format Painter to spread it across or to duplicate it in other places. Okay, so next we're going to zip right along to page 103, and we're going to talk about Find and Select, which is incredibly important. We're going to go to where it says Replace. Now let's say in your document, every time you entered some text, you had 2 spaces instead of 1, or you had an abbreviation instead of the full word. We can fix that by looking through the whole document and replacing everywhere where it has that particular mistake. So in our case, let's type in Sue, and she wants us to change that to Susan. There we go. Okay, so now I'm going to press Find All or Replace All. So I can press Find Next, and it's going to say, oh, there it is. Okay, and I press Replace, and it will change one for the other. I could also change the format by searching for a particular cell that's a particular color, that has a particular number. I could search within the rows by formula, etc. This is very powerful if I need to make a correction across hundreds of cells. This could automatically go through and do them all, including some formulas that I set up for the sheet. Okay, so next we'll talk about themes, which is on page 105 and 106. And basically, if we go into the page layout ribbon at the top, we can click on themes here at the left and get a whole bunch of pre-made themes, which will give us different color options. And you'll notice that, here, I'll click one. You'll notice that the font changed and the colors changed. This is an easy way to set everything up automatically if you're looking for a particular font, look, color combination. Okay, this will help you do that very quickly, because they're already built in. If you want to change them individually, we'll go back to our original, and you could change the individual colors, like change your color scale, your color scheme. You could change the fonts depending on how you want the sheet to look. And we have a whole bunch of different effects. Normally, you don't need any of these to present your numbers, but it's a really good idea to see how it is, because when you're writing a report and you're not just analyzing the data, you want to be able to show it in a nice format and present it in something that's easy to read. So by using themes and formatting, you're able to do that. As we talked about before, there's also margins. You could have narrow margins if you want to fit more on the page, or normal has a border around the page. And we can see that by clicking down here and taking a look at how it will look on the page based on this, which is the printable area. Okay, so if we have a lot of data, this will be one of the factors. Okay, now let's get into something exciting. Page 107, highlighting cells with conditional formatting. Okay, so we have these numbers. It looks fancy. I could tell you the averages so far. We also learned last time how to do maximum and minimum, so I'll put those in now. As we already talked about, if I want to find out what the biggest number is, I type in equals max, and then the range. So I'll go over here, and I'll type in equal max, and we'll grab this range, close the bracket, and this is going to be the largest number, and this is going to be the smallest number. So basically, who did the best and who did the worst. So to do this, I type in equal min, and I'm just going to grab this range as well. Now, this formula, let's take a look at it, basically calculates the smallest number from C3 to C9. If we drag sideways, it's going to do the same thing, calculate the smallest number from D3 to D9, from E3 to E9, and from F3 to F9, depending on the column. And we'll drag this one to the side as well. Okay, so what could I tell you? The person who brought in the most revenue was this one right here, Larry, and the person who brought in the least, 7.5, was Brian, right? So this will tell us the largest numbers and the smallest numbers. But what do we do if we want to differentiate them up here? If you remember in the last module, we had an example where we had some cells that turned green. So let's try to do that with conditional formatting. So I'm going to grab all the quantities up at the top, press conditional formatting, and we'll have to choose create a rule. So I'm going to say if you were successful, you sold over 20 boxes. So I'm going to say greater than 20 boxes, and we're going to make that one green because they did a good job. But anybody who sold less than 20 boxes, I'm going to make that red because they did a bad job. Okay, so we can go through this and fill them out, and there's many, many different options. I'll do a red border. Okay, so right away, visually, I see these guys did great and this guy didn't. And then based on the numbers that we put in, they could change because the formatting sits behind the numbers. So if I change the 43 to 15, oh, suddenly it becomes a red box also because behind the numbers, the formatting is trying to always see, does the number equal what I'm looking for? So I'll change this back to a higher number and it will go green again. Okay? Now, from figure 2.32, you could look at some of those examples. We could look at greater than, less than, is the number between two numbers, is it equal to a number, is it text that contains a certain thing, a date, or duplicate values. We can also have top and bottom rows, like we want to find the top 10%, the bottom 10%, the top 10 items, the bottom, etc. Right? So let's take a look at this. We'll go in here and we'll go into where it says clear rules from selected cells. So we'll get rid of all the conditional formatting that we have. Now I'll go back to normal. Okay, I'm going to highlight them again, and let's take a look at the top 10%. Okay, so I want to say format cells that rank in the top 10% with, we'll do green. Okay, so Larry is only in the top 10%. Now again, if you think about it, the numbers are a little skewed because some people did way better than others. And I'll graph it for you for a second, just so we could visually see what's going on. Okay, so if we look at it like a pie chart, Larry did like 50%. Okay, if we look at it in a graph, there's a lot of different ways we could look at this, but basically just putting it up here, Larry did amazing, like just by the numbers, twice as good as the, or more than the next person behind him, which is Mo. He got 345, Mo only got 126. Okay, so that's why this is the top 10%. The top 10% is relatively compact compared to everybody else. Okay, now if we try to grab those and let's take a look at the bottom 10%. Okay, so we'll take the bottom 10%, fill it with red, and then here we go. We have Brian is in the bottom and everybody else is sort of in the middle. But we could try to adjust those numbers to see if we can figure out who fits into one group. So right now I'm going to clear rules from the selected sheets and we'll go back here. We can also use other visual indicators. Let's take a look at some of them. I could use data bars. So you see that the numbers, depending on how large they are, will change depending on how big they are, right? So there's gradient fill is basically clear towards the end, and that means we can still see the numbers in it, whereas this is a solid fill, it makes it a little harder to read the numbers. We could also use color scales. You just have to make sure which end of the color is being mapped. So in this case, right, green, yellow, red, the green is the highest number, red is the lowest number. Now, in our case, the more boxes you sell, the better it is, so that makes sense. You could also do it backwards, where let's say the higher the number was, the worse it is, then this would make more sense, right? You'd have the lower number, the better. So if we were looking at, instead of the number of cookies sold, the amount of time it took in a race, we'd want to have the lowest number, or the person who was fastest, to be green, whereas the person who was slowest with the biggest number to be red. Right? So it just depends on what you're doing. So we can look through some of these and see what the differences are, what colors we use, and what the gradient scale is. Okay, we could also use icons. So there's many different icons, and basically we're looking at the number versus the rest based on the average. Okay, so we could look at, does the person meet a certain amount, and we can customize these also to say like, okay, so Mo did okay, he sold over 100 boxes. Larry sold 345, he's doing great. Everybody else failed. Why? Because it looks at the average and then divides it by the number of people. Right? So we could try to have these visual indicators, because when I quickly look at the sheet, I could be like, okay, Larry's good to go. Mo and Homer are doing all right, and everybody else needs to improve. So this is a way for us to quickly gauge what's going on. And like I said, the interesting thing about it is that once we format the cells like that, we're able to have it running behind the background, right? So let's say anybody who sold over 100 is great, right? So we'll say greater than, and we'll say anything that's greater than 100, and so far we have 2. we want to fill that with green. Okay, so I just come in here and I say, oh, Larry and Mo, they're doing great. But when Brian gets to 100, his box changes to be green as well, or at least it should. Let's try 101. There we go. Okay, the reason why that happened is because when I put in greater than, I didn't do greater than or equals to. So that is important. Okay, if I go into manage rules, it will show me my rule here, and it will say if the cell value, I'm going to edit the rule, and we'll say greater than or equals to 100. Okay, now if I change this to 100, we'll be good. Okay, so I just want to show you where that is again. So I applied the rule by just going in here and saying if the number is greater than 100, and when I did it, I obviously selected the whole range, so it applies to everything. Okay, so I'll go conditional formatting, greater than, and I said greater than 100, fill with green, and I pressed OK. Then to make sure it was doing what I wanted to do, I went to conditional formatting, manage rules, and we have 2 of them right now, so I'll delete one of them. Okay, now you'll notice here, if you look at the symbols, it says cell value greater than or equals to 100. And if I didn't have that, greater than or equals to, it wouldn't count 100, only 101. Okay, so we'll just quickly zip through that and do it one more time. So I put in greater than, I grab, let's try 50 this time. Okay, and if it's over 50, it's going to be green. Okay, and then I'll just double check here, and I want to change this instead of greater than 50, because this would only start at 51. I'm going to go to edit, and I'm going to say greater than or equals to, and press OK. I could also go to format down here and change what color it shows up at. So I could make it black. So this is going to be the preview of what it looks like. I can make it bold and press OK. So let's take a look what this looks like. Okay, so it not only makes the numbers, the cells green, it also makes them black. Okay. We also talk about top and bottom on page 109. That just grabs the top and bottom. Page 110, we could do a quick analysis with conditional formatting. Okay, so let's take a look at how that works. So I'm going to go and clear everything. I could just go here where it says clear rules from the selected cells or the entire sheet. I'll pick the entire sheet, and we'll go back to the way it was before. I'm going to just get rid of this chart, and we'll start again. So I'm going to grab quantity, grab these guys. You'll notice when I do that, a little box pops up here at the bottom, right? Quick analysis. I'm going to click on that, and it just lets me throw in data bars, colors, icon set, greater than, top 10, etc. And you can see an example of that on page 110. Okay, if we pick top 10%, we can go into the top 10 dialog box like we looked at before, which is here. And we could choose our percentage. We could also choose what color it happens. So I'm going to go green fill, and I'm going to make this top, I don't know, 30%. Okay, you'll notice as I change it, more things fit into there as well. Okay, so the text points out something important, which should include, if you're doing this, it should include a legend, which you can see on page 111 and 112. And that's really important because if I just give you the sheet, you could probably figure out what these numbers mean. But like we said, is the best the lowest? Is the lowest the best? We don't know, right? Are we looking for the biggest number or the smallest number? So if we just write down here, we put in some information, then we're able to understand what's going on. So I just put in, let's look at their example. They say top, I think we said 30%. And then, okay, so this is what they put into their version. Oops, sorry about that. Let's try this. And then they put in some kind of conditional format so you know, there we go, something like that. So I don't know, there's some indicator that when you look at the sheet, what's going on. Now, you'll notice that it's very important to follow the rules. I would say this is critical on page 113, written communication. It's important because you'll notice that all the sheets that come as samples have this extra worksheet called documentation. Okay, now in this sheet, you put this first before sheet 1, and you explain what's going on. So I'm going to write the purpose. What was this again? Cookie Club sales. And I would explain what was going on, and then I would put in what the highlighting means, and I would explain, like, the purpose of this sheet is to track cookie sales for the people who participated in our club, etc. Right? So by doing that, I could have some information when the person opens up the sheet who's not familiar with it by what's going on and how they could use the sheet. And it's a good format. It's good. It's a good form. It's a good habit to get into because that will let you have very clear and concise sheets. Okay, so we looked at page break. How's it going to print? Okay, so everything, we're good right now because everything's going to print on one page. See, it says page 1 right there. If we look at it on page view, you can see everything fits in the page. And we're good as far as the printing goes. If we had to print multiple pages, we'd have to figure out how does it break up. To see an example of that, look at the top of page 114 in figure 2-39. Okay, and then we could see page 115, how to in figure 240, how to print non-adjacent cells. We talk about adding print titles on 117 and removing the automatic page breaks on 116, and so on. Okay, so I think that we are so far doing okay. Let's skip past 119 header dialog box. It basically, if you follow the steps for this, which is all in here, step by step, you should see how to put that all together. So I'm in my sheet. I'm just going to click on the header dialog box and scroll up. Here I have add header, and I could just type in the title of the sheet. So let's type in Cookie Sales 2018. All right. Now you'll notice that this puts it at the top of the sheet when it prints out, but according to this or my regular sheet, if I look at a regular mode, it doesn't show up anywhere. It only shows up when I print it. Okay, so if I go to File Print, let's see if this works. This is what it will look like. It will have the thing formatted here at the top, the title, and it will have the table with my graph. Now, again, if I'm printing in black and white, then this could have an impact on it also. So I should know that because by making things grayed out or colored, it could be difficult to show up. So it's a good idea to be aware of how you're going to print it and what it's going to look like. Visually, this might look nice on a color printer. It could be better to use things like these double lines if you're on a black and white printer. And that brings us to the end of Module 2. And that's pretty much it. If you have any questions, let me know. And have a fantastic week. Sorry, one more last thing. Since we're talking about formatting, I just wanted to explain how the conditional formatting works. So let's grab a group of numbers, and we go to conditional formatting. First thing is, we could go down here to manage rules and see what formulas, what conditional formatting is active on the sheet. So right now, if I go to manage rules, I don't have any because those cells that I selected don't have any. I could go to my quantity, which I do have, and I'll go down to where it says manage rules, and I have two rules that show up. The top 30% is this, the top 10% is that. Okay, so I'm going to delete these rules, and we'll apply a couple new ones, and I'll show you how they work in detail. Let's go back to icon sets. Okay, so right now I have these icons showing up. Everything seems to be going down, one seems to be going up, and I'm going to go to where it says more rules. Now it says what icon style do I want? This is format all cells based on their values. So I could scroll up and down this list. We'll pick the same arrows that we had before, and we could choose what they mean. So we could choose the icon. You see we could pick a bunch of different ones. And we could pick what these things mean. We could reverse the order of the icons. So we can make green at the top or red at the bottom. And we could say if it's greater or equals than 67% overall, then give it a green. But in our case, we're going to pick number. And we're going to say give it a green if the number is over 50. Okay, we're going to say give it a yellow if the number is over, let's say, 30. and give it a red if it's less than 30. Press OK, and now here's our new system. But everybody got over 30, but there was some people between 30 and 50. So those were yellows and the rest were green. Now if we want to edit that, we could just go to Conditional Formatting, Manage Rules, and change this from current selection to this worksheet, and it will show us what's active. If we have a whole bunch of different conditional formatting active in different places, by not selecting anything, we could just go in here, Manage Rules, and go where it says this worksheet, and it will give us all the ones that are active, and we could fix them. Now, since they run in order, we can also check here and say stop if true, and that means if we have multiple formulas running on the same squares, instead of them changing over and over again, it will stop on the first one when it hits, like to highlight it or something else. We could also start a new rule from in here, and we could format cells based on their values, format only cells that contain a certain number that are between top thing. And this is useful when we're looking at, let's say, text in Excel, and there's a whole bunch of yeses and a whole bunch of nos. We could instantly color coordinate them depending on what the value is. So I hope that makes using conditional formatting a little more clear and will help. Now, if we have something like this where we have two overlaid and it becomes confusing, we already talked about it. Simple. You just go into either clear rules. I can clear them for the entire sheet, or I can go to manage rules and delete the ones that I don't want. So let's go into manage, and we'll delete the top one here, and it should go back to the way it was before, right? So this gives you a lot of options, whether we're going to manage rules or whether we're going to any one of these into more rules. We're able to format how they work, what colors they are, only formatting certain cells, between numbers, etc. And if used correctly, and I would say used judiciously because you don't want to do too much of this, it could make the data a lot easier to read. Like in this case, if we're telling people that, you know, the yellows need improvement but the greens are great, then that would be an easy thing to explain and to see visually when we go into the sheet.